My name is Eleanor Hayes, and I was 70 years old when I learned the kind of truth no mother should ever have to face. Grief has a way of slowing the world down, of softening all the edges, but betrayal slices clean. It sharpens everything. It wakes you up in ways you never wanted to be awake. Henry, my husband of nearly 50 years, had been gone for just 11 days when the world I thought I knew cracked for the second time. He died in his sleep, quietly, without warning, leaving me with photographs, memories, and a silence that felt heavier than the coffin we lowered into the earth. I believed the worst part of my life had already happened. I believed the storm had already passed. But storms don't pass. Sometimes they reveal what was waiting underneath. I was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the cup of tea I hadn't touched, when I heard their car door slam. Michael and Sophie never knocked, not even once in all the years they'd lived 15 minutes away. They walked in as if the house already belonged to them, calling out my name with those careful, syrupy tones people use when they're trying to sound gentle. Mom. Michael stepped into the kitchen. His expression was soft around the edges but wrong in the center, too forced, too prepared. Sophie stood beside him, arms folded, her eyes scanning the room like she was taking inventory. I tried to smile. You both came early. Sophie exchanged a glance with Michael before answering. We needed to talk. It's important. Those words, we need to talk, never mean anything good, not when you're a 70-year-old widow trying to hold yourself together. Michael pulled out the chair across from me. Mom, we've been thinking about your situation. His voice carried the calm of someone who had rehearsed his lines. The house is too big. Too much work. Too many memories. Too many memories. As if memories were trash to be swept out the door. I can manage, I said, even though I wasn't sure that was entirely true. Sophie leaned forward. You shouldn't have to manage. You're fragile now. And honestly, this place is dangerous for someone your age. The stairs, the yard. Everything. I felt the faintest hint of a tremor in my hands. What exactly are you trying to say? Michael didn't soften it. Not even a little. You can't stay here anymore, Mom. The room froze. Even the ticking clock seemed to hesitate. I blinked. I don't understand. You shouldn't be alone in a house this big, he continued. Sophie and I talked, and we think it's time for you to transition. Maybe a senior facility. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can, finish your years peacefully. Finish my years. Peacefully. As if my life were already over. My breath caught in my throat. This is my home, Michael. The home your father and I built. It was, Sophie said, her voice cool, almost impatient. But things change. And honestly, Michael has a responsibility to protect the estate now. He's the heir. Everything needs to be in order. I stared at them, my pulse ringing in my ears. Heir? What are you talking about? Michael let out a breath like he'd been waiting for that question. Dad left everything to me, Mom. The lawyer handled it. You weren't well enough to attend the reading. I felt something inside me begin to fold in on itself. Your father would never leave me with nothing. Sophie shrugged. Look, denying it won't help. Michael has full ownership now. And we've decided you need to find somewhere else to live. Then she added the sentence that would replay in my mind for months. You need to find somewhere else to die. It was so casual, so brutally effortless, that I thought I had misheard. But Michael didn't correct her. He didn't flinch. He simply checked his watch. We brought some suitcases, he said. We can help you pack. My vision blurred. Not from age, not from weakness, from disbelief. From heartbreak. From the realization that my son, the boy I raised, the boy whose scraped knees I kissed and whose nightmares I soothed, had waited less than 2 weeks after burying his father to discard me like an old, broken piece of furniture. Michael. Please, I whispered. He stepped back. It's for the best. And with that, the life I knew ended. They packed my things. Every movement quick, efficient, transactional. Sophie zipped the last suitcase, handed me a thin envelope with $200 in it, and walked me to the door with the kind of politeness people use for strangers. Michael didn't hug me. He didn't look at me. He simply locked the door behind us as if it had never been mine. As their car pulled away, leaving me on the curb with 2 bags and a shaking heart, I realized something with a clarity sharper than grief. Henry's death hadn't broken my family. His absence had revealed what was rotten inside it. And I had no idea that this betrayal was only the beginning. I arrived at the motel just before sunset, my suitcases rolling unevenly behind me as if they, too, were reluctant to follow. The place was called the Maple Inn, though nothing about it resembled maple trees or anything warm. A flickering neon sign hummed above the entrance, and the air smelled faintly of old cigarettes and cheap disinfectant. It wasn't the kind of place anyone chose by preference. It was the kind of place you ended up when life stopped giving you choices. I checked in using the $200 Sophie had shoved into my hand, money that felt less like help and more like hush money. The clerk barely looked at me, just slid a key across the counter and returned to whatever he was watching on his phone. I walked down a dim hallway, listening to the distant rumble of strangers' footsteps and televisions through thin walls, and unlocked room 12. The room was small, dim, and sagging at the seams. The mattress dipped in the middle, the walls were the color of faded oatmeal, and the single lamp flickered every few seconds as if unsure whether it wanted to participate in my misery. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floral curtains as if they held answers. But no answers came, only memories. Henry used to call me Ellie. Even when his hair turned white and his hands trembled, his voice softened every time he said my name. 2 months before he died, he'd taken my hands in his and said, "You'll never have to worry, Ellie. I've made sure of it." Those words repeated in my mind now, louder than the motel's humming air conditioner. If Henry had made sure I'd never have to worry, why was I sitting alone in a budget motel with nothing but 2 suitcases and a hollow ache in my chest? Grief has a strange way of clouding your thoughts, but betrayal sharpens them quickly. And somewhere between my shock and my sorrow, a seed of suspicion began to sprout. Michael had lied about many things: his tone, his intentions, his concern. What if he had lied about the will too? The thought gripped me so hard that I stood up abruptly, steadying myself against the bedside table. I needed answers. I needed the truth. And there was only one person who might have it. I found my purse, pulled out my phone, and dialed Mr. Lawson's office. He had been Henry's attorney for 20 years. A quiet, steady man with a reputation for honesty and a voice that always reminded me of polished wood. When he answered, I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Mr. Lawson? It's Eleanor." There was a pause. "Eleanor? My goodness, where have you been? I've tried calling the house for days." I hesitated. I'm not living there anymore." "Not living, what do you mean?" My throat tightened. Michael told me Henry left everything to him. He said there was a will reading, but I was too sick to attend. "I don't understand anything." Silence. But not the kind that comes from confusion. The kind that comes from shock. "Eleanor," he said slowly, "there was a will reading. But you were never marked as absent. Michael told me you were traveling out of state with friends and asked me to postpone giving you your copy until you returned." The motel room seemed to tilt around me. "Traveling? Mr. Lawson, I haven't left this town in 6 years." His voice hardened with sudden urgency. "Eleanor, that doesn't make sense. You were supposed to receive Henry's packet. Michael insisted he was handling everything on your behalf." My stomach felt hollow. What did the will say?" "I can't discuss the details over the phone," he replied. "But I need you to come in. Immediately. It's important." Important. That word echoed inside my skull like a warning bell. I wiped at my eyes, suddenly aware of how small and fragile I felt in that dim room. "Mr. Lawson, did Henry really leave everything to Michael?" A beat. Then, softly, "Eleanor, I think you've been lied to." My heart clenched. "Please," he continued, "come to my office in the morning. We need to talk in person. And Eleanor, make sure Michael doesn't know you're coming." A shiver ran through me. "Why?" I whispered. "Because if my suspicions are correct, your son has already crossed legal lines. And he may be willing to cross more." I sat there long after the call ended, staring at the peeling wallpaper, letting the truth settle in like cold water. Henry promised he had secured my future. Michael had promised he would protect me. One of them was telling the truth. And in the cold, stale air of room 12, I realized I was finally ready to find out which one. When I walked into Mr. Lawson's office the next morning, I felt like a woman carrying the weight of an entire lifetime on her shoulders. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched my purse, not from age this time, but from the fear of what I was about to learn. I had spent the entire night replaying Henry's voice over and over. His promises, his reassurances, his final months of quiet preparation. And now I stood on the edge of knowing whether those promises had been real or just wishful memories. Mr. Lawson rose from behind his desk as soon as he saw me. His lined face softened with concern. "Eleanor, I'm so sorry for everything you've been put through. Please sit." I eased into the chair across from him, my heartbeat echoing faintly in my ears. He didn't waste time. He reached for a large leather folder, carefully unfastened it, and slid a stack of documents toward me. "This is Henry's final will," he said. "Signed, notarized, and updated 6 months before his passing." I swallowed hard. "Michael told me." "I know what he told you," Mr. Lawson interrupted gently. "And unfortunately, it was a deliberate lie." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. A mother's instinct fights against believing her own child capable of cruelty, but facts do not bend for love. "Eleanor," he continued, "your husband left almost everything to you." My head lifted sharply. "What do you mean, almost everything?" He took a deep breath and began reading from the will, his voice steady and clear. 70% of all financial assets, accounts, investment portfolios, and properties are bequeathed to my beloved wife, Eleanor Hayes. He looked up at me. That amount was valued at approximately $35 million. The room seemed to tilt. $35 million? "Yes," he said softly. "And there is more." He returned his eyes to the document. "The remaining $15 million shall be placed in a conditional trust for my son, Michael Hayes. He will gain access to this trust only if he treats his mother with respect, dignity, and proper care following my death." My breath caught. "Conditional trust?" He nodded. Henry was very clear. He was worried about Michael's attitude, his entitlement, his impulsive behavior, and the way Sophie influenced him. He wanted to ensure you would never be mistreated. A bitter laugh escaped my lips before I could stop it. "Well, Henry predicted that perfectly." Mr. Lawson didn't smile. He lifted the final page of the will and tapped Henry's signature. "Because Michael threw you out of your home, lied about the will, and failed to provide even basic dignity, he forfeited the entire trust." I stared at him, my pulse pounding so loudly I could feel it in my fingertips. "So, what happens to the trust?" "It reverts to you, Eleanor, as per Henry's written instructions." I blinked, trying to process the magnitude of what he was saying. "So, you're telling me everything? All $50 million, the house, the accounts, everything, is mine?" Mr. Lawson nodded solemnly. "Yes. Legally and indisputably yours." Silence stretched between us, heavy and electric. I felt a wave of heat rise to my cheeks. Shock, relief, anger, heartbreak, all tangled together. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Michael had thrown me out of my home. My son. My only child. He had stood in my kitchen with the same hands I once held while he learned to walk, and told me to find somewhere else to die. All while knowing, he was stealing a fortune from me. Tears blurred my vision, but they weren't just from pain anymore. They were from the sharp, searing realization that Henry had seen the truth long before I did. He had tried to protect me. He had put everything in writing. He had left me resources, safety, independence. And Michael had tried to erase it all. Mr. Lawson leaned forward. "Eleanor, I need to ask you something. Did Michael show you any documents? Any signatures? Any copies of the will?" I shook my head. "No." He said the attorney told him everything belonged to him. He said I wasn't well enough to attend the reading. My voice cracked. He lied so easily. Mr. Lawson exhaled sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. This is fraud, Eleanor. Clear, intentional fraud. And depending on the documents he used to transfer ownership, it may also involve forgery. The word forgery hit me like cold water. He forged my husband's will? I whispered. It's highly likely, he replied. And it means he committed multiple felonies. I closed my eyes, letting the truth settle into me, not gently, not softly, but like a stone finding its rightful place at the bottom of a river. Michael hadn't just betrayed me. He had committed crimes against me. When I opened my eyes again, something inside me had shifted. Something steady, something strong, something I didn't know I still possessed. What do we do now? I asked quietly. Mr. Lawson straightened his glasses, his expression resolute. Now, he said, we take everything back. Legally, carefully, and completely. I nodded, and for the first time since Henry's death, I felt a spark of something I thought I had buried with him. Hope. And right behind it, justice. I had always believed that grief made a person feel small, but betrayal can make even a 70-year-old woman feel strangely awake. When Mr. Lawson told me we needed to involve law enforcement, my hands trembled, but not from fear. From anger. From justice finally stepping out of the shadows. Detective Marcus Brooks was assigned to my case the same afternoon. He was a tall man with salt and pepper hair, calm eyes, and a way of speaking that made every word feel deliberate. When he shook my hand, he held it firmly, respectfully, something my own son hadn't done in years. Mrs. Hayes, he said gently, I've read Mr. Lawson's report. And from what I understand, someone has committed serious financial fraud against you. I swallowed. My son, I whispered. My only son. He nodded, not unkindly, but with the matter-of-fact professionalism of a man who had seen too many families torn apart by money. Let's go through everything, he said. Every document, every transfer, every signature. For the next several hours, I sat beside him and Mr. Lawson as they laid out Henry's original paperwork. The real signatures. The real dates. The authentic transfers Henry had made in preparation for his passing. Then Detective Brooks opened a second folder, the copies Michael had filed. Even I could see the differences. The signatures weren't Henry's handwriting. The notary stamps didn't match. The dates had been altered, crudely at times. Some documents looked like they had been printed and rescanned multiple times, the edges fuzzy, the ink uneven. Detective Brooks shook his head. Your son didn't even try to be subtle. My chest tightened, but I stayed quiet. He continued reviewing the documents, flipping page after page. Then he pushed one form toward me, a deed transfer Michael had filed 2 days after Henry's funeral. This claims you gave Michael full ownership of the house, he said. I stared at the signature on the line marked Eleanor Hayes. It wasn't mine. I lifted my gaze, shocked. Detective. I never signed anything. Never. He nodded. I know. That's why this is forgery. And forgery of this kind is a felony. A cold stillness settled over me. My son had stolen my home using paperwork he forged in my name. He didn't just lie to me, he impersonated me. Detective Brooks made several calls, his voice measured but firm. Within an hour, every major financial institution connected to Henry and me had verified unknown activity. Transfers, withdrawals, digital authorizations. Some done through Michael's IP address. Others done through Sophie's. It was worse than I imagined. By late afternoon, Detective Brooks exhaled and gave a single decisive nod. We have enough probable cause. I'm freezing all accounts immediately. Mr. Lawson leaned back. That will stop them from moving or spending anything that doesn't belong to them. I felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow wash over me. My heart hurt, but justice was finally standing beside me. And across town, the ripple effect began instantly. While we sat in Mr. Lawson's office, Sophie was apparently at a high-end boutique in the city, her usual playground of expensive handbags and social status. According to the timestamp we later saw, she attempted to pay for a $4,000 purse. Her card declined. She tried another. Declined. Then another. All declined. Store camera footage later showed her face twisting in disbelief, then embarrassment, then fury. She stormed out of the store, phone already pressed to her ear, calling Michael. Michael, meanwhile, was at home reviewing vacation packages, something he clearly thought he could now afford with the millions he believed he had inherited. When Sophie screamed through the phone about the frozen accounts, he snapped up his laptop. The moment he tried to log in, he saw the same message. Account suspended. Contact your financial institution. He tried another account. And another. All frozen. He went pale. Then red. Then livid. And then, my phone rang. I saw his name flash across the screen. A name that used to bring comfort. Now it only carried weight. I answered calmly. Hello, Michael. His voice came through like a blade. What did you do? I breathed in slowly. What do you mean? Don't play dumb, Mom. He snapped. All the accounts, every single one, they're frozen. Sophie's cards aren't working. My transfers won't go through. What did you tell the bank? I looked at Mr. Lawson sitting beside me, then Detective Brooks, and finally said, I didn't talk to the bank, Michael. I'm sitting with your father's attorney. And a detective. Silence. Thick. Heavy. Dangerous. What? His voice cracked. Everything is exposed, I said softly. The forged signatures. The fraudulent transfers. The lies. All of it. For a moment I heard nothing. No words, no breath, no movement. Just the sound of my son's perfect little empire crumbling. Finally he whispered, Mom, you don't understand. But for the first time in a long time, I actually did. I understand more than you think, I replied. And now, so does the law. I ended the call. And as I placed the phone down, I felt something settle inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction. Just truth. Truth that had finally stepped into the light. I had always believed I knew everything about my husband, his habits, his fears, his quiet routines, the way he held my hand when he thought I might stumble, the softness in his eyes when he told me stories from his younger days. After 50 years of marriage, you think there are no surprises left. But Henry had protected me in ways I never realized. And the biggest truth of all was still waiting in the shadows. A few days after the accounts were frozen, Mr. Lawson suggested bringing in a private investigator, someone who could trace every unusual transaction Michael had made and uncover any deeper fraud. That person was Carol Jensen. She walked into the office with the confidence of a woman who had seen every trick in the book. Sharp eyes, firm posture, a leather folder tucked beneath her arm. She shook my hand with surprising warmth. Mrs. Hayes, she said, I'm here to help you find the truth, all of it. I nodded, though my stomach tightened with nerves. Mr. Lawson offered her a seat. Carol, we believe Michael may have transferred assets using forged documents. But Eleanor also thinks Henry might have left her more than we initially realized. Carol opened her folder. I've already reviewed Henry's financial history, at least what's publicly visible. But there's something unusual. I leaned forward. Unusual how? She placed a printed sheet on the desk. It listed deposits, large ones, spanning over a decade. These payments, she explained, tapping the page, came in regularly for 12 years. They aren't from investments. They aren't from retirement accounts. They're from federal channels, coded under classified fund releases. I felt my heartbeat slow. Classified? I whispered. Carol nodded. Mrs. Hayes, were you ever aware of Henry being involved with federal agencies? I shook my head instantly. No. He worked at the manufacturing plant all his life. He never mentioned anything government-related. Carol exchanged a look with Mr. Lawson, a look that said the truth is much bigger than we expected. She lifted another document. I filed a formal request for background clarification. This morning, I received confirmation from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My breath caught. The FBI? I repeated. Carol exhaled slowly. Henry wasn't just an employee at a factory. For 12 years, he served as a covert informant for the FBI. He assisted in gathering information on a major financial crime ring operating in 3 different states. I stared at her, stunned. Henry? My Henry? The man who never even raised his voice. Yes, she said gently. He was highly trusted. He provided critical information that helped dismantle multiple fraud networks. The federal payments he received weren't illegal. They were reward funds, informant compensation, and protective disbursements, all documented. The room felt suddenly smaller. All those nights Henry came home tired. The trips he said were routine meetings. The times he held my hand and told me not to worry about the future. He had been protecting us. Protecting me. Carol continued. The total amount he earned through federal rewards matches almost exactly the $50 million he left behind. Tears stung my eyes. Not from sadness, but from a raw, overwhelming pride I hadn't allowed myself to feel since he passed. My God, I whispered. He did all of that, to keep us safe? Carol nodded. And to make sure you never suffered. That's why everything was put in your name. He knew the dangers. He knew the risks. He planned for every possibility, including what might happen if Michael ever attempted to take advantage. My chest tightened with emotion. Henry always said he'd take care of me, even when I told him he worried too much. Carol closed the folder gently. He took care of you in ways you never saw. There was a silence in the room, not empty but full. Full of the weight of a man's secret life, full of love expressed through sacrifice, full of protection that outlived death. I wiped my tears. Michael doesn't know any of this, does he? No, Carol said. And that gives you an advantage he never expected. Mr. Lawson leaned forward. Eleanor, understand what this means. The money Michael tried to steal isn't just inheritance. It's federal reward money. Tampering with it elevates this entire case. Carol added, attempting to forge documents to access federal funds is extremely serious. The FBI will intervene directly once the full details are processed. I felt something shift inside me, a quiet steadiness replacing the fear that had lived there for weeks. Henry was protecting me, I murmured, more to myself than to anyone. And Michael tried to destroy the very thing his father risked his life to build. Carol's expression softened. Your husband trusted you with this legacy, and he trusted that you would know when to stand your ground. For the first time in days, I inhaled deeply and didn't feel like the air was too heavy. Michael had lied. Sophie had manipulated. They had forged, stolen, and schemed. But Henry had prepared for all of it, quietly, carefully, lovingly. And now, the truth shifted the power entirely into my hands. As I left the office that day, sunlight filtered through the windows, catching on the tears still drying on my cheeks. I whispered softly into the empty air. Thank you, Henry. I'm going to finish what you started. I never imagined that at 70 years old, I would find myself sitting in a federal office while an FBI agent explained how to wear a recording wire under my sweater. Yet there I was, hands trembling slightly, heart beating a little too loudly in my chest, as Agent Carter secured the small device against my ribs. His voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that made you feel like nothing in the world could go wrong as long as he was in the room. Mrs. Hayes, he said gently, I need you to remember that you will not be alone for a single moment. 2 agents will be posted outside your home. I'll be listening the entire time. If anything turns dangerous, we intervene immediately. I nodded, swallowing against the nerves building at the base of my throat. I understand. Agent Carter held my eyes. Your son and daughter-in-law are planning to extort you. We need proof. Wearing this wire allows us to capture their intentions clearly, in their own words. A mix of sorrow and steel spread through me. Michael. My only child. The boy I once rocked to sleep, the boy whose scraped knees I kissed, the boy I believed would hold my hand in my old age. Now he was coming to take everything from me. I'm ready, I whispered. Agent Carter gave a firm nod. Then let's set the trap. Back home, the house felt eerily still, like it was holding its breath with me. I walked slowly into the living room and sat on the sofa, smoothing my blouse to make sure the wire stayed flat. My hands only shook a little. Agent Carter's voice came softly through the earpiece hidden beneath my hair. "We're in position. They'll be here soon." And right on time, headlights swept across my window. A knock followed, sharp, urgent, full of entitlement. I inhaled deeply, letting Henry's memory steady me. "This is for you too, my love." I opened the door. Michael and Sophie walked in like they owned the place, shoulders high, expressions tight with fake concern. Sophie carried a slim folder, and Michael clutched a briefcase he clearly thought made him look authoritative. "Mom," Michael said, forcing warmth into his voice, "we really need to talk. It's important." I motioned toward the living room. "Then talk." They sat across from me, a pair of vultures dressed in designer clothes. Sophie spoke first, legs crossed, voice sweet but razor-edged. "There's been confusion and misunderstandings. We think it's best for everyone if we resolve this privately." Michael chimed in, eyes darting nervously. "Right. We don't want lawyers involved. We don't want the police involved. We're family." Family. The word nearly made me laugh. I kept my tone soft, controlled. "And what exactly are you proposing?" Sophie slid the folder onto the coffee table and opened it, revealing typed documents. "A settlement," she said. "A fair one." Michael leaned forward. "Mom, you're 70. Managing $50 million. That's a lot of responsibility. You could get confused. Make mistakes. Be taken advantage of." I almost smiled. Their manipulation was suddenly so transparent it was insulting. Sophie continued smoothly, "So here's our offer. You keep $5 million, enough to live comfortably." I stared at her. "Only 5?" She nodded, confident. "Yes. And in return, you sign everything else over to us. All assets, all accounts. And you retract your accusations, especially the part about forged signatures." Michael added quickly, "In exchange, we'll keep Dad's secrets quiet. You don't want the FBI to dig deeper into his finances, right?" My heart twisted. They knew nothing, absolutely nothing, about Henry's truth. Yet they were trying to blackmail me with it. Exactly what the FBI predicted. I tilted my head. "So you're saying that if I don't agree, you'll expose information about your own father's financial dealings?" Michael hesitated, then nodded. "If we have to, yes." Every word slid perfectly into the trap. Sophie leaned forward, voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just imagine the consequences if the wrong people discover everything Henry was involved in. You could lose the entire inheritance. The house. Everything." I let the silence stretch. Agent Carter whispered in my ear, "Perfect. Keep them talking." Finally, I spoke. "Why 5 million? Why that number?" Sophie smiled, proud of her answer. "Because it's enough for your old age without being excessive. And it prevents you from accidentally attracting the wrong kind of attention." I raised an eyebrow. "And what do you two get?" Michael didn't hesitate. "Security. Stability. The life Dad meant us to have." I sat back, pretending to consider it. "And if I say no?" Michael's expression sharpened. "Then we go to the authorities with everything we found. We'll make sure they know you're involved. And trust me, Mom, an elderly woman tangled in financial crimes? That won't go well for you." There it was. The threat. The extortion. The line he could never uncross. I looked straight into my son's eyes, the same eyes Henry once had, and said quietly, "Henry trusted me far more than you ever will." Michael blinked. "What does that mean?" I smiled softly. "It means this conversation is over." At that exact moment, the door burst open. Agent Carter and 3 federal officers stepped inside. "Michael Hayes." "Sophie Hayes," Carter said, voice loud and authoritative, "you are under investigation for attempted extortion, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, and coercion." Michael shot to his feet. "What? You can't, Mom. What did you do?" I stood slowly, feeling stronger than I had in years. "I protected myself," I said softly. Something your father always hoped I would learn to do. Sophie's face drained of color. You trapped us? No, I replied calmly. You trapped yourselves. Agent Carter lifted the wire from beneath my blouse, holding it up as evidence. The entire conversation, he said, is recorded. As they were handcuffed, Michael looked at me with a mix of rage and disbelief. How could you, Mom? I held his gaze steady. How could you, Michael? He had no answer. The trap had been set. And it had snapped shut perfectly. The moment the wire came off my chest, everything that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted. It was like the air in the room shifted, heavy, electric, charged with a finality I had never experienced before. The trap had been sprung. The truth had been recorded. And the reckoning had arrived. Michael stood frozen as the FBI agents surrounded him, his face drained of color. Sophie, trembling violently, clutched the edge of the coffee table as if it might anchor her to the life she had just lost. Agent Carter's voice was steady and unshakable. Michael Hayes, you are under arrest for attempted extortion, conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and obstruction of justice. Another agent turned to Sophie. Sophie Hayes, you are under arrest for conspiracy, financial fraud, and participating in the extortion attempt. The sound of metal cuffs clicking shut echoed through my living room. My living room. My house. My life. Michael jerked against the agent's grip, outrage twisting his features. Mom. Are you serious? You set me up? You're letting them arrest your own son. His voice wasn't the voice of a child betrayed. It was the voice of a man who had finally been forced to face the consequences of his greed. I felt an unexpected calm settle over me. Agent Carter stepped aside, giving me space. Mrs. Hayes, if you want to speak to him, you may. Michael twisted toward me, eyes burning with fury. How could you? After everything I've done for you? After everything this family has been through? I walked closer, my steps slow, steady, grounded in a truth I finally understood deep in my bones. What you've done for me. I repeated softly. Michael, you threw me out of my home. You told me to find somewhere else to die. You forged documents to steal what your father left me. You tried to blackmail me with lies about him. He tried to look away, but the weight of the truth held him in place. Sophie burst into tears, shaking her head. We were just trying to protect what we deserved. I cut her off gently but firmly. You deserved nothing. Henry left you nothing except a chance to show him you had grown into good people. And both of you proved him wrong. Michael's jaw tightened. None of this would have happened if you hadn't run to the police. You turned on your own son. I took a deep breath, feeling decades of quiet endurance rise into strength. No, Michael, I said, my voice clear, unwavering. A real son protects his mother. You destroyed yours. The room fell silent. Completely, utterly silent. Sophie sobbed harder. Michael's shoulders slumped, his fight draining away as the truth cracked the shell of denial he had built around himself. The agents began guiding them toward the door. Michael dug his heels into the carpet. Mom, don't do this. Please. Think about what people will say. Think about the family. Think about the future. I looked at him steadily. I am thinking about the future. For the first time in a very long time, I am thinking about my future. Agent Carter nodded to the others. They continued escorting Michael and Sophie outside where two black SUVs waited in the driveway. The porch lights illuminated them as they were led out, hands cuffed behind their backs, faces pale with fear and disbelief. Neighbors peeked through blinds. A car slowed on the street. This was not a quiet arrest. This was a public fall. Michael glanced back at me one last time, desperation replacing anger. Mom, don't let them take me. Please. I held the doorframe, steadying myself. I didn't let them take you, Michael. You gave yourself to them the moment you chose greed over love. Sophie cried out, we can work this out. Families forgive. I met her eyes with a coldness she had never seen in me. Family doesn't do what you did. The agents placed them in separate vehicles. Doors slammed. Engines started. And just like that, Michael and Sophie were gone. Taken into the night they believed they controlled, swallowed by consequences they never thought would reach them. I stood alone on the porch, the winter air brushing against my skin, carrying with it a strange mixture of grief and liberation. My heart ached for the boy I once raised, the child who held my hand as we crossed the street, the teenager who hugged me after his first heartbreak. But the man he became, the man molded by entitlement and greed, was no longer someone I recognized. Henry had known this might happen. I had been too blind to see it. Now, finally, I wasn't blind anymore. Agent Carter joined me at the doorway. "You did incredibly well tonight, Mrs. Hayes." I nodded slowly. "Tonight, I lost a son." Carter's expression softened. "Ma'am, with all respect, you didn't lose him tonight. You lost him the day he decided your life was worth less than your money." A tear slid down my cheek. "Maybe you're right." He offered a small, sincere smile. "And you didn't just lose something. You gained your power back." I looked out into the dark street, where the FBI vehicles disappeared around the corner. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a quiet strength rising within me. Not loud, not dramatic, but deep and steady. "I think," I whispered to myself, "this is the beginning of something new." The fall of my son was not the end of my story. It was the turning point. The night I finally stood up, reclaimed my life, and chose myself. And there was no going back. 6 months is not a long time in the grand scheme of a 70-year life, but somehow, these 6 months transformed me more than the previous 30 years combined. Grief had once filled my days, betrayal had nearly crushed me, and fear had guided every decision. But now, as I stood in the center of my newly renovated home, I realized something extraordinary. I had not just survived. I had rebuilt. From the ground up, brick by brick, truth by truth, choice by choice. I reclaimed the woman Henry always believed I could be. The house looked nothing like the place Michael and Sophie once tried to claim. The old wallpaper was gone, replaced with soft earth tones and warm lighting. The kitchen Henry and I had used for decades had been remodeled into a bright space with new cabinets, marble counters, and a large breakfast nook where I now enjoyed morning coffee without tension gripping my chest. For the first time in my life, the house looked like mine. "You did beautifully with the renovations," said Sandra, my new interior designer, who had come by to inspect the final touches. "This home finally reflects who you are, Eleanor. Strong, graceful, and timeless." I smiled at her. "Thank you. It feels like breathing clean air after living underwater for years." And she was right. This home no longer echoed with fear, tension, or the ghost of my own silence. It held a new truth now, a truth built on courage. A few days after the renovations were complete, I sat in my sunlit living room reviewing brochures and mission statements for something even more important, the Eleanor Hayes Foundation for Senior Justice. It still startled me to see my name at the top in bold letters. The foundation had one purpose: to protect seniors from the very things I had faced: financial abuse, coercion, forced displacement, and manipulation from their own families. Using $15 million of my inheritance, I established free legal aid for elderly victims, emergency housing funds, investigative support, and a national hotline. The board members, brilliant women and men in law, social work and finance, believed wholeheartedly in the mission. At our first official meeting, the chairman stood and said, "Mrs. Hayes, your courage created something that will change lives for decades." My voice wavered, but my conviction did not. No one should ever be thrown out of their home by the children they raised. No one should ever be made to feel useless or disposable. If my story can protect even one person, then every tear was worth it. The room erupted into applause. I never expected to become an advocate at 70. But life doesn't end at retirement. Sometimes, it begins again. My transformation didn't stop there. 2 months after Michael and Sophie's sentencing, a producer from Streamwave Studios contacted me about turning my story into a documentary series. "We want to bring awareness to elder abuse," she said. "Your story is powerful, Mrs. Hayes. It deserves to be heard." I hesitated. My life had been so private for so long. But then I thought of all the silent victims, women like me, who had swallowed their pain for years. So I agreed. Filming began in the spring. I sat in front of cameras, my hands folded neatly, and told the world what happened, not with bitterness, but with clarity and strength. They filmed my renovated home, the Foundation's first outreach event, and even joined me at the courthouse for a seminar on elder financial protection. The documentary, The Woman Who Rose Again, was scheduled for release the following winter. The producers believed it would reach millions. Henry would have been proud. I felt him with me every day. But with every step forward, there were reminders of the past. Michael had been sentenced to 24 months in a federal facility. Sophie received 18. For the first 2 months, I heard nothing from them. And then came the letters. One after another. Dozens of them. At first they were angry. Then defensive. Then desperate. Mom, please forgive me. Mom, I wasn't thinking clearly. Mom, you're the only family I have left. Mom, I promise I'll be different. I read the first 3, then stopped counting. I did not hate him. I did not wish him pain. But forgiveness does not require reunion. One afternoon, I sat with Agent Carter in my kitchen as we reviewed new safety protocols for the Foundation. He noticed the unopened stack of letters on the counter. "You're not responding?" he asked gently. I shook my head. He wrote to ease his own guilt, not to repair what he broke. Carter nodded thoughtfully. Boundaries are also a form of healing. I know, I said. And I've finally learned to choose myself. There was a time I would have leaped at any chance to restore the relationship. There was a time I believed motherhood required sacrifice until there was nothing left of myself. But that time had passed. Now, I protected what remained of my peace. Michael would have to live with the choices he made. And so would I. Summer arrived with soft breezes and blooming roses in my backyard garden. Flowers I planted myself without trembling, without asking permission, without worrying that someone would accuse me of doing it wrong. This was my life. My home. My second chance. One morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows, I stood in front of my newest painting, a self-portrait. The woman in the painting wasn't the frightened widow who packed her life into 2 suitcases. She wasn't the mother who staggered beneath betrayal or the wife who thought her strength died with her husband. She was someone new. Bold. Steady. Unbroken. A woman who had reclaimed everything stolen from her. Her dignity, her future, her power. I touched the frame lightly, whispering the truth I now lived by. The best revenge, I said softly, is becoming everything they never believed you could be. And I had. I truly had. As I walked into the next room to prepare for a Foundation gala, a quiet certainty settled over me. This was just the beginning. Not of a life shaped by others, but a life shaped by me. Eleanor Hayes had risen. And she would never fall quietly again. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you in any way, please like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories every week. Your support helps these stories reach the people who truly need to hear them. See you in the next video.